So we made it to chapter 4, Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. And this chapter is called The Immovable Movers. So it starts out with some devastating news. So in the previous chapter, just like a paragraph above this one, Eddie was talking to somebody he has lunch with, Eddie Willers, and he was saying how there aren't many good contractors left, but they got a good contractor to do this railroad that they need to finish up in a year on the Rio Norte line. They got the Rearden metal, everything's flowing, things are going to be good. And they're going to use the same guy that she used to finish the San Sebastian line in Mexico, and it only took her a year. And so they had been working on that for 3 months and only had a third of it laid when she got on the project. So this guy is good. But then she finds out that McNamara quit. That's the first news she gets hit with to start off chapter 4, which is messed up. It's what's the matter, Eddie? McNamara quit. McNamara, our contractor? Yes. What happened? Why? Nobody knows. Taking her time deliberately, she unbuttoned her coat, sat down at her desk, started to pull off her gloves. Then she said, "Begin at the beginning." What did he say? That McNamara, so they called, but they couldn't get McNamara. They got somebody at his office, or they talked to his chief engineer. And Dagny says, "What did he say?" And Eddie says, that McNamara has closed his business and gone. Where? He doesn't know. Nobody knows. So that's some really strange crap. So I'm thinking now somebody paid this guy off. He's missing, he's in the desert somewhere. They're not going to find the body. Somebody has stake in this railroad not getting finished, or, in these policies in Washington getting passed and such. So somebody either went and paid off this guy, McNamara, to quit, or they were like, you either take the money or else, so to speak. So Eddie says he's walked out on a pile of contracts that are worth a fortune. So who would do that, right? He had a waiting list of clients for the next 3 years. So he's given up a lot of money to just drift off into the sunset. She takes a walk, whatever. We get up to Dagny's apartment, and it's described with long triangles of shadow cutting the bare walls in a geometrical pattern of light rays broken by a few angular pieces of furniture. I wasn't sure if the geometrical patterns and triangles were hints at a love triangle coming up. There's this Danconia guy, there's Hank Rearden, and she obviously chose to go with his steel. So you're just thinking, maybe, right? So I wrote that in there, that could be foreshadowing for that. So they really get into Richard Halley, who's the composer that she really likes, and was making a big deal about, did he have a fifth concerto in the first chapter? So Richard Halley writes an opera called Phaethon. Pretty sure I'm pronouncing that right. And he wrote it at the age of 24. So he writes this opera called Phaethon. So he changed this ancient Greek myth to his own purpose and meaning. Phaethon, the young son of Helios, who stole his father's chariot. Helios is the sun, or the sun god. So he steals his father's chariot and in ambitious audacity attempted to drive the sun across the sky. But in Halley's version, he did not perish as he perishes in the myth. Halley's opera, Phaethon, succeeded. The opera had been performed 19 years ago after one performance to the sound of booing and catcalls. So that night, Richard Halley had walked the streets of the city till dawn, trying to find an answer to a question which he did not find. On the night when the opera was presented again, 19 years later, the last sounds of the music crashed into the sounds of the greatest ovation the opera house had ever heard. The ancient walls could not contain it. The sounds of cheering burst through to the lobbies, to the stairs, to the streets, to the boy who had walked those streets 19 years ago. So what I thought was really cool about that is he wrote a myth about faith on the sun god, and the sun and the moon have a great cycle or a great year, and every 19 years the sun and the moon get conjunct back into the same spot in the heavens as they were 19 years ago. And they do this throughout their whole cycle. So like no matter what part of their cycle, I guess you could go 19 years and be in that same spot. And so yeah, the 19 years is the great year. And so it says Dagny was in the audience on the night of the ovation. She was one of the few who had known the music of Richard Halley much earlier. He did not bow. He did not smile. He just stood there looking at the crowd. His face had the quiet, earnest look of a man staring at a question. On the day after the opening, Richard Halley retired, and so nobody's really heard or seen from him since. And then she starts thinking about Francisco d'Anconia, and she sees him in the newspaper while she's listening to Richard Halley's music. And d'Anconia goes to the Wayne Falkland Hotel, and he grants an interview to the press, and he says he wanted to witness the farce. And they were talking about how he was messing around with somebody's wife, potentially, maybe. And he says, I don't deny anything, but, he didn't say it was true either. So yeah, she's pretty disturbed about that, Dagny. So you get the sense that she's got some history with Francisco because her brother also mentions it in previous chapters. And so you're starting to build up a picture here about Francisco and Dagny and their previous love life, but now she thinks he's a worthless bum. And everybody seems in agreement, but he's a worthless bum who makes money when he actually decides to work. So then they go into James Taggart. He's messing around with his lady friend, not his wife or anything. He's just somebody he sleeps with. And it's a pretty scary scene. And they're just talking crap about his sister Dagny, and he wants to go on the board of directors and set them straight because he's like, I'm not going to let my sister, mess around taking all this stuff off the Mexican line. I'm going to go in there and talk to the board and screw her over and have her put all our equipment back on the line. So then he gets a call from Mexico City before he goes into work, and the voice comes over the phone. I couldn't help it, Jim. It gulped. I couldn't help it. We had no warning. I swear to God, nobody suspected. Nobody saw it coming. I've done my best. You can't blame me, Jim. It was a bolt out of the blue. The decree came out this morning, just 5 minutes ago. They sprang it on us like that, without any notice. The government of the People's State of Mexico has nationalized the San Sebastian mines and the San Sebastian Railroad. So then they get nationalized, which this guy said was a joke, right? Like a chapter ago. So you're really getting a sense that this guy is a clown. And it just gets worse because then he goes into the board meeting and he goes, I'm glad to report that I foresaw the possibility of such a turn of events and took every precaution to protect the interests of Taggart Transcontinental some months ago. I instructed our operating department to cut the schedule on the San Sebastian line down to a single train a day, which is what his sister Dagny did. Here he is taking credit for it. And to remove from it our best motive power and rolling stock, which is what Dagny did. And here he is taking credit. As well as every piece of equipment that could be moved. The Mexican government was able to seize nothing but a few wooden cars and one superannuated locomotive. So superannuated is obsolete technology. And my decision has saved the company many millions of dollars. So yeah, his decision has saved the company. So there he is taking credit for his sister's hard work. She ends up not really giving a crap. She's like, I got a railroad run. She's really passionate about it. If her brother wants to take credit for her hard work, whatever. She doesn't really care. Little more than just like an annoyance. And so James tries to get a meeting with d'Anconia, and d'Anconia is not taking his calls because he's pissed. He's like, what happened? Why did they nationalize our mines? Why is there no copper? Why are we making no money, right? And then all of a sudden, the National Alliance of Railroads is proposing a bill for the anti-dog-eat-dog rule. Members of the same profession or the same industry should stick together, the organizers of the alliance said. It was said that while the public welfare was threatened by shortages of transportation, railroads were destroying one another through vicious competition. Oh, heaven forbids, right? Oh, goodness forbid, you have competition, right? The brutal policy of dog eat dog was, killing people, killing, good production, supposedly, which we know was BS. The rule provided that the members of the National Alliance of Railroads were forbidden to engage in practices defined as destructive competition, that in regions declared to be restricted, no more than one railroad would be permitted to operate, that in such regions, seniority belonged to the oldest railroad now operating there. And guess what? James Taggart owns the railroad that's been operating where the Phoenix Durango is competition has been operating all along. Ellis Wyatt, who gave his business to the Phoenix Durango, has chosen to use Phoenix Durango because their Rio Norte line is garbage. Because James went and spent a whole bunch of money in Mexico instead of fixing that up, and so lost the business. So now he's using the National Alliance of Railroads him and Orrin Boyle are cooking up this plan where they're going to use the National Alliance of Railroads to cut out the unbridled competition he was bitching about in the chapter before. So that in such regions, seniority belonged to the oldest railroad now operating there, and that the newcomers who had encroached unfairly upon its territory would suspend operations within 9 months after being so ordered. That the executive board of the National Alliance of Railroads was empowered to decide at its sole discretion which regions were to be restricted. So this board gets to decide which regions to restrict. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to say, well, we have the Phoenix Durango and Taggart Transcontinental operating out of the same freaking place coming from Colorado. And we don't need two of them because that's unbridled competition. That's dog eat dog. So we're going to get rid of one, and the union gets to decide. So even though Taggart's messing around and they've got the seniority, so they get to stay and benefit from Ellis Wyatt's production in the mines there and the products he's pumping out. So they have this meeting, they pass the legislation, which screws this guy, Dan Conway, who's the guy who owns the Phoenix Durango train line. He's now screwed, and he knows it. Like, this is his big business, this is his money ticket, and they're taking it away from him and saying, he can go to blighted areas or damaged or destructive areas where nobody's going to give him the business he needs, right? Why should it be this guy's job to go serve those areas? And then Orrin Boyle, that snake, comes out and he says, I've delivered. It's your turn now, Jimmy. So obviously he wants James to use his friends in Washington, D.C. to get legislation passed that helps him out in regards to Hank Rearden. And the fact that Rearden's got basically the market corner because he's the most productive and he won't sell his steel to this worthless dude, Orrin Boyle. So the anti-dog-eat-dog rule just a few minutes ago at the meeting, 9 months from now, there's not going to be any Phoenix Durango Railroad in Colorado. So this is what James Taggart says to his sister after he gets all pumped up and, after this meeting with the National Alliance, and he goes, I'm going to save the railroad too. You're not the only one doing big things for the railroad, Dagny. And Dagny's like, you rotten bastards, because she doesn't want to win like that. And that actually screws her because, now they don't have a railroad that's that great and they have to service this guy Wyatt, and they're not ready to do that. She was planning on fixing it up first. So, and winning the business back. And of course, that's how it is, right? She was ready to go into competition. The competition was going to strengthen each railroad. And that's kind of how she saw it. Instead, the unions and stuff are taking it upon themselves to tell people what to do. So there goes your freedoms there. And, they're going to tell people what's good. But what's good is this Phoenix Durango guy is the one being productive, and Taggart's not being productive on that line. And why shouldn't they both be allowed to compete there, right? So she goes and rushes to see Dan Conway. She's like, this is so messed up. My brother's such a douche. Can't believe he would screw you over like that, ruin your railroad. And she's like, I'll help you fight this. I don't care that we're competition. I'll help you out. And this guy's kind of given up. He's like, I'm done. It's going to be worse for you than it is for me. It's like, I'm just going to fade in the sun. I'm going to go fishing. And even though he was a good guy, he was ran a productive business. Like whatever happened to him, and he was done. So then she calls up Hank and she's like, listen, we got to set up a meeting. And that's about when this guy, Ellis Wyatt, walks into her office and he's like, I'm not messing around. I have no interest in discussing anything with you. I don't care what you have to say, but you're going to listen to me. And he's like, if you don't cut the mustard, I'm taking you down with me. If in 9 months you're not ready to deliver my product the way you're supposed to when the Phoenix Durango, because they have 9 months to phase them out, a year. So in 9 months, now Dagny has to be ready. She was planning on a year or so to fix this railroad up. Now she has 9 months to get it back up and running so that this guy, Ellis Wyatt, can keep his business. And so he just says, listen, I'm taking you out. And of course, she responds to him in such a way by saying, you'll get the transportation you need, Mr. Wyatt, even though he's kind of like going in on her. And she saw a faint hint of astonishment in his face. So again, she astonishes everyone. She astonishes, all these people she comes into contact with. She fills them with wonder. They're always surprised by her. And then she goes to see Hank, which is a really awesome part. And she says, you're going to give us the railroad over a period of 1 year. Can you give it to us in 9 months? And Rearden's like, he's thinking about it and he's like, I'll do it. It's cold, cool, calm. I'll do it. He's not messing around. And then Dagny feels relieved, which is great. Hank is talking to her about this dog eat dog bill, and they're both stressed out about it. Not stressed out about it, but they're both talking about it. They're both against it, right? And Hank's like, that's right. They won't. When I heard about the anti-dog eat dog business, it made me sick. But don't worry about the goddamn bastards. The 2 words sounded shockingly violent because his face and his voice remained calm. You and I will always be there to save the country from the consequences of their actions. He got up, he said, pacing the office. Colorado isn't going to be stopped. You'll pull it through. Then Dan Conway will be back and others. All that lunacy is temporary. It can't last. It's demented, so it has to defeat itself. I love that quote. All that lunacy is temporary. It can't last. It's demented, so it has to defeat itself. It's almost like if something's just so depraved, so evil, so, mad, then it just has to collapse in on itself. I like that sort of quote, that outlook, even if it may not be true. And then in his office, she notices one astonishing detail. So something astonishes her. It's not very often she's astonished. Normally she's the one doing the astonishing. But either way, there's always like the astonish. I just like to point it out. So I can't understand why, Jim, she stopped, in reference to her brother, James. Tries his best to harm my business because your brother Jim is a fool, Rearden tells her. And then Hank Rearden goes on to say, don't waste time trying to figure him out. Let him spit. He's no danger to anyone. People like Jim Taggart just clutter up the world, which is kind of a good way to put it, right? I mean, this guy's got some communist stuff now. Hank may be wrong about the damage that he can do because this guy is nuts. He's not productive. He's full on, communist, but not really, right? It's like, when it suits me, we can seize property and shut you down and do this for the good of humanity. But, we all know that in the end, it's all bullshit. It's all about, when it suits me, fine. When it doesn't, he's not going to be for it, right? So then Dagny's talking about Hank Rearden's Rearden metal, and she says when I think of what that metal can do, what it will make possible, Hank, this is the most important thing happening in the world today, and none of them know it. Now, this got me so amped up, right? Because when you're reading it, you're just like reading all of it, and you just see how awesome this all is. And he says, you know, and then she says, it's the most awesome thing in the world today, and none of them know it. And he says, we know it. And, that's what matters. So they're talking about how Dagny and him are watching the crane at one point in this chapter, and the crane moved back in majestic indifference. And I'm thinking to myself, she uses this word indifference as a way to almost describe nature in this book, like the natural order of things. It's just indifferent. It's black and it's white, and it's cold and it's hot, and it's this and it's that. And in the end, it's just sort of like there's an indifference to nature. You can be cold or you can be hot. You can be this or you can be that. But it's your choice in the end. So it was funny. I was thinking how, this is her way of describing the natural world. And as they watch this stuff, it says, then the first words she said were not about rail track or an order completed on time. She said as if creating a new phenomenon of nature, Rearden metal. So there I am thinking indifference is being used to describe nature, and there they are watching Rearden metal, and then Rearden metal is, a new phenomenon of nature. So it almost paints it as like Rearden metal is a natural creation. They took natural ingredients and put it together in a way that made it even stronger. It's like as if it's natural to do that. And so you get this sort of, the majestic indifference, this the sovereign power or authority of nature that comes through it. It's only natural that if you use the laws of nature that you can create something even more productive, even greater. So then they speak of all the possibilities of this metal. And then it says she had forgotten her brother and his national alliance. She had forgotten every problem, person, and event behind her. They had always been clouded in her sight, to be hurried past, to be brushed aside, never final, never quite real. This was reality, she thought. This sense of clear outlines of purpose, of lightness, of hope. This was the way she had expected to live. She had wanted to spend no hour and take no action that would mean less than this. And I thought that was awesome. Like, there they are, saving the world, so to speak, saving the country, putting together production. And there she is, like, amped up. She's like, this is what I want to do. I want to solve real problems, get real shit done. And there they are, like, talking figures and math and reason and, rationality. And then it said, if joy is the aim and the core of existence, she thought, and if that which has the power to give one joy is always guarded as one's deepest secret, then they had seen each other naked in that moment. So, wow. You talk about maybe a love triangle coming up between her and Rearden. And there they are painting the picture right there. And how cool, like, they can finally understand what gives each other happiness. And then an important thing happens. We haven't any spiritual goals or qualities. All we're after is material things. That's all we care for, is what Rearden said. She looked at him, unable to understand. But he was looking past her, straight ahead, at the crane in the distance. She wished he had not said it. The accusation did not trouble her. She never thought of herself in such terms and was completely incapable of experiencing a feeling of fundamental guilt. But she felt a vague apprehension, which she could not define, the suggestion that there was something of grave consequence in whatever had made him say it, something dangerous to him. He had not said it casually, but there had been no feeling in his voice, neither plea nor shame. He said it indifferently, as a statement of fact. And then he said, Dagny, he said, whatever we are, it's we who move the world, and it's we who will pull it through. And I thought that was awesome. So he's talking about, people who produce product, people who get things done, people who are men and women of action, and of rationality and competence and reason and logic are people who are getting things done in the practical world. And I thought that was really cool that he put it like that. So really great stuff. If you're in the book by chapter 4, you get pretty into it. You know, by chapter 2 or 3, I was really hooked. So it's really good. I mean, the part about Halley, Richard Halley, and the sun, Helios, and the 19 years. And then the other stuff about, you know, her and Rearden and this anti-dog eat dog. And wow, McNamara quitting or being forced out, somebody getting to him. Crazy. So this union crap is nonsense. And there's a lot of really good descriptive things she puts out here. It's very interesting, very fun to read. So tune back in for chapter 5's analysis and let's keep the story flowing.